Hello again and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be looking at how to make comparisons in Hellenistic Greek, how to talk about what's good, better, and best. Adjectives have comparative forms. A normal adjective tells us that the noun it modifies, or nominal it modifies, has some property. Well, Greek uses a comparative adjective to say that something exhibits this property to a greater degree than something else. In order to form a comparative adjective, you add a ending onto the end of the regular adjective stem, and that ending is teros, tere, teron. So mikros, which means small, becomes mikroteros, which means smaller. Teleios, meaning perfect or complete, becomes teleoteros, meaning more perfect or more complete. Kainos becomes kainoteros. Genaios becomes genaioteros. Poneros becomes poneiroteros. And iskuros, meaning strong, becomes iskuroteros, meaning stronger or more powerful. Some of these comparative forms are a little bit irregular. In several cases, this is just a matter of the connecting vowel being lengthened, an omicron lengthening to an omega. So kakos, bad, becomes kakoteros, worse. Dunatos, strong, becomes dunatoteros, stronger. Monos, alone, only, becomes monoteros, more alone, lonelier. Eleutheros becomes eleuthoteros, more free, freer. And timios becomes timioteros, more precious, more valuable. Occasionally we see some other stem changes. In asthenes, the vowel right before the final sigma actually shortens, and so we have asthenesteros, weaker or less healthy. But that's an unusual kind of change. Sometimes an adjective that regularly takes first or second declension endings, like kalos, will take third declension endings in its comparative form. So kalos, in the comparison, becomes kalion, more beautiful. And in these third declension forms, the masculine and feminine forms are the same, and kalion is that masculine or feminine form, and just the neuter form is slightly different, kalion. But they're both declined regularly like third declension nouns, and the masculine and feminine are declined like simon. And so kalion in the genitive becomes kalionos, kalioni in the dative, kaliona in the accusative, etc. Kalion, the neuter form, will be similar. We'll have kalionos in the genitive and kalioni in the dative. But remember that with neuter forms of nominals, the accusative is the same as the nominative. So the accusative form will again just be kalion. A similar thing happens when we look at megas, which is third declension already in the regular form of the adjective. That becomes another third declension maidzon, maidzon, in its comparative form. If megas means large or great, maidzon, maidzon means larger or greater. Polus, which means many or much, in its comparative form becomes pleion or pleion. And there's some inconsistency here whether we spell that with an epsilon iota diphthong or just with an epsilon. Is it pleion or pleon? And we'll see both forms in the New Testament. But if polus means many, pleion means more numerous. Engus, which means close, in the comparative becomes engion, closer or narrower. Occasionally, we'll find a different root altogether used for the comparative form. So agathos uses the comparative form beltios, beltie, beltion. And agathos can also use a second comparative form, which is kreton. And this is a third declension comparative form, kreton for the masculine and feminine, and kreton for the neuter. And notice, as often happens, that in words with a double tau at the end of the stem, that double tau can fairly often shift to a double sigma. So we'll sometimes see kreton, meaning better, and sometimes kreson, meaning better. We also need to, in our comparisons, have a way of talking about superlative forms. Not just something that's more like the adjective, but something that is the most like that adjective. Something that exhibits that quality more than anything else. There are two standard superlative endings. One is istos, and the other is tatos. So kakos, bad, becomes kakistos, worst, most wicked. Megas becomes megistos, largest or greatest. Or with the tatos ending, we have mikros, which becomes mikrotatos, smallest. And be careful here not to confuse the teros comparative ending with the tatos superlative ending. Mikroteros would be smaller, but mikrotatos is smallest. Teleos becomes teleotatos, most perfect. Poneros, evil, becomes ponerotatos, worst or most evil. Iskuros, strong, becomes iskurotatos, strongest. And engus, close, becomes engutatos, closest or narrowest. As with the comparative forms, here too we sometimes see lengthened connecting vowels or minor stem changes. So the single lambda in kalos, in the superlative form, adds another lambda to become kalistos, most beautiful. The omicron in polis drops out in the superlative form, and an epsilon is added after the lambda. So we go from polus, many, to pleistos. But notice we still have that istos ending. It's just that the short vowel omicron has changed to an epsilon and moved. Monos becomes monotatos, again the connecting vowel lengthening to an omega. Hagios becomes hagiotatos, holiest or most sacred. And timios becomes timiotatos, most honored, most valuable. Here again, agathos uses two entirely different stems to form its superlative forms. Agathos means good, but the way you talk about the best is to use beltistos, beltiste, beltiston. Or you can use kratistos, kratiste, kratiston. And notice again, although the stem is different, we don't have the agath, we use belt or krat. The istos superlative ending is quite regular. There are some adverbs that can also help us when we're making comparisons. One is hos, with a rough breathing. This means like or as. And so we might say, Phoebe kalos estin hos Dorcas. Phoebe is beautiful like Dorcas. Hutos means like this or in this way. You notice the hoot part looks a little bit like the near demonstrative pronoun hutos, but we have the os part at the end, which has to do with adverbial ideas. And so hutos means to do something in this way. We might say, Epon Sophia es ta peripatesai autein hutos. I told Sophia, Epon Sophia, that she should walk, es ta peripatesai autein, like this, hutos. Similarly, homoios is derived from homoios, which means like, similar, and os, that adverb ending. So homoios means that something is performed in the same way or happens similarly. Homoios legus and Diodoros kai Simon. There we would be saying that Simon and Diodorus speak the same way or in the same way. Kathos means just as or just like or in the same way as. So it's similar to homoios, but there's more of an implicit comparison between something, some action that's happening here and some action that you've just mentioned. So we might say, as in 1 John 4:17, kathos akenos estin, kai hemes esmen en to cosmo tuto. We are in the world, hemes esmen en to cosmo tuto, just like kathos, that man is, akenos estin. Here are some adjectives and pronouns that can also help us in making our comparisons. We just saw homoios means in the same way, and so the adjective homoios means same or similar. There's a pronoun, toiutos, toiaute, and toiutu, which means this kind or such. For example, in Mark 4:33, we read, toiautais parabolais palais, elale autois ton logon, kathose dunata akuein. He was speaking the word to them with such parables, toiautais parabolais, just as they were able to understand. Similarly, poios, poia, poion, is a pronoun meaning what or what kind of. So in Matthew 21:23 we read, and poia exousia tauta poies. These are the people around Jesus asking, by what poia authority are you doing these things? You can learn more about making comparisons in Greek in Mounce's Basics of Biblical Greek, and particularly in the section on comparative forms of adjectives.